Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mengs, and today I welcome you guys back to another Fire Emblem tier list. The last one that I did of Fire Emblem 6 got an enormously good response. A lot of people really enjoyed it, so I'm going to be making another one for you guys today. It's going to be Fire Emblem 7 that we're going to be checking out, and I'm going to be using the Fire Emblem Sorter, a webpage that allows you to rank Fire Emblem characters in a list. Normally it's supposed to be used for like popularity purposes, but I'm going to be making a tier list of the best units gameplay-wise. So, we're going to be selecting Blazing Sword, and we are just going to jump right into it. I'm going to be including a speedrun of Fire Emblem 7 that I just did for entertainment purposes. So let's go. In the events that it brings up unplayable characters, I am just going to skip them. So there we go. Alright, so it's time to go. The first matchup is Farina versus Karla. This one's quite easy. I don't like how Farina, I mean, both of them are Hector exclusive characters. It's kind of cool that they show up at the same time. For Farina costs a lot of money. Karla sucks and is not available for a very large majority of the game. I actually used Farina in my Fire Emblem 7 playthrough with Mecha, and I was actually surprised of how good she is, because you can really give her a lot of experience in the map where she joins. Sure, she's a bit pricey, but she actually turns out rather well as a unit. I'd say she's superior to Florina. No, not Florina, Fiora. Even though Florina is the best of the three. I actually got sort of like a new outlook on Farina, so definitely gonna select her. Renault versus Athos. Athos is a very good character, but he's only available in one map, as opposed to Renault, who can be available in 3 maps. But I'd say that overall, I think Athos wins out on this one, because Athos can literally solo the final map. This is something Renault cannot do. So even though he has 3 times the availability, if you unlock the final Hector Gaiden chapter, I'd say Athos wins out in this regard. Nino versus Jaffar. This one's easy. Jaffar's really, I mean, he's not good, but he's better than Nino. I mean, he's got really solid bases, and his damage output is absolutely incredible, especially when you're lucky like me and you proc silencer all the time. So yeah, definitely Jaffar. Oh, Pent versus Louise. Well, I'm gonna have to rate Pent here. He's simply one of the best units in the game, whereas Louise is, while she is my waifu, I have to be objective and rate. Nah, I'm not gonna screw around and rate Louise first. I'm actually going to be objective here, so Pent. Hawkeye versus Heath. I think I'm going to go with Hawkeye here. Heath is flyer. He's pretty good. His bases are solid. Becomes a good Wyvern Lord. But I'm gonna have to say that Hawkeye is simply just too good. I mean, his bases are just so good, and if you give him a barrier or a pure water, he can easily deal with mages. Like, he's supposed to have low resistance, but his massive pool of hit points is so high that he just never dies to anything. And with the Killer Axe, even though he doesn't double, he has a good chance of just one-shotting almost everyone at base. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna go with Hawkeye here. Ninian versus Isadora. Well, Ninian's a dancer, so that's an easy choice. If I have to tell you how good a dancer is, you are either not very good at Fire Emblem, or maybe you're Blazing Knight. I don't know, maybe both. Fiora versus Legault. I don't consider Legault very useful. Like, he's a good... I tend to, like, replace Matthew with him, just because he's a thief with better bases, and I don't tend to promote my thieves, because I don't consider a fell contract worth 50,000 gold worth it to just get a bad Jaffar. But I'd say Fiora's better. She's good if you don't play Lin mode and your Florina sucks. She's not fantastic, but she gets the job done, and the gold is just basically Matthew with a better base stats. That's the only way I know how to rate him. So yeah, Fiora definitely. Raven versus Canas. I'm gonna have to go with Raven here. Raven's really good. I really got a new appreciation of him and me and Mecha's latest Fire Emblem 7 playthrough. His bases are really strong, and his damage output is incredible. He's sort of like Deke from Fire Emblem 6. He's equally good on the offense. Like, he can even take out some Cavaliers with an Iron Blade, which is really fucking impressive. Given an Armor Slayer, he one-runs Armor Knights. Like, there's a lot of things Raven can do. His low luck bothered me a bit at first, because he tends to get low percentage critted, but as long as he gets some Tactician stars, then this problem is usually solved, so I'm gonna go with Raven here. Even though I do like Canas. Oswin versus Guy. I like Oswin. He's actually one of the better Armor Knights in the series, mainly because his base level is extremely high. I like Guy too, but Guy is sort of like, he's a bit of a one-trick pony. Like, the one thing that's good about him is that with the Killing Edge, he can one-run some guys on hard mode. But I'd say that Oswin overall is probably a more useful unit than Guy. I mean, they're both, I'd consider them both. I think I rated Oswin 4 stars in my Fire Emblem 7 LP, but the Mecha corrected me and said that he's more like a 3-star unit. So they're pretty similar, but I'd say that once you break your Killing Edge, Guy loses a lot of what makes him good, especially when you move away from the early game axe users. Like, Blazing Sword has a lot of magic users, and and lance units in the mid game, as well as sword units. As well as sword and lance units. Whereas the brigands and fighters, they tend to like die off a little bit after the kill arc, so he loses a lot of his momentum right there. Whereas Oswin can be useful throughout the mid game if you need him to. Like, I gave Oswin way too many kills in my playthrough, which really hurt my rankings, but I think I'm gonna have to go with Oswin here. He's a really good unit. Wallace versus Lowen, easily Lowen. Lowen's really good. I rated Lowen pretty low in Fire Emblem 7, but I realized that he's just as good as Kent and Sain. He's actually better because he joins earlier, so... And I like his tankiness. Like, he's a Cavalier that doesn't die on his own, which is really nice, and his bases are pretty good for his starting levels, so definitely Lowen here. Nils versus Lucius. I'm gonna rate Nils and Ninian the same unit for the purposes of this playthrough, because they are basically the same unit, even though they're two different characters. They transfer the experience between each other, so they are basically one unit. Rath versus Matthew. I gotta say that I definitely, as with many other units, I got a new appreciation for Rath in my playthrough because Rath can use the Brave Bow at base. There's not a lot of other units on your team that can use the Brave Bow, so it kind of just lies around your convoy and collects dusts. It's not like, you know, you don't, unless you use Wool and Rebecca, there's no one else who are really going to be able to use that thing. And Louise joins much later. But Rath, he actually comes with B rank in bows, so you can use the Brave Bow to like pick off some really strong units. But Matthew is just one of those units who are just like a must-use. You need Matthew to get so many of the early important units. You need him to get the first Guiding Ring. You need him to get the Silver Card. You need Matthew, like, up until where Legault comes in. If you don't use Matthew, you're gonna struggle. So I think I'm gonna have to say Matthew simply because he is such a must-use, whereas Rath is completely optional. You don't need the Brave Bow. It's just very nice to have. Alright, Dorcas versus Serra. Well, this is easy. We all love Dorcas, but he's not a very good unit. Serra's a staff user. The first staff user you get, you got no choice but to use her in the early game. And if you decide to keep using her, she's a serviceable unit. Not as good as Priscilla, but still a good unit, whereas Dorcas is sadly not very good at all. Florina versus Will. This is easy. Archers are terrible. Florina's a really good unit overall. Early game availability, good growth rates, really good potential. Sain versus Kent. I think I'm gonna have to go with Sain on this one. Kent is the defensive one, Sain is the strong one. I do believe Kent has slightly better speed than Sain though, but I usually find that, you know, Kent tends to be very durable, Sain tends to do a lot of damage, and I do tend to favor offense over defense in the Game Boy Advance games, because the enemies are usually killing enemies is the best defense you have, just getting rid of all enemies, so I don't end up liking tanky units for that reason, so Sain definitely gets a rank up there. Eliwood versus Hector, this one's quite easy. Eliwood's not very good up until the moment where he promotes. He's a pretty big liability. Hector's useful throughout the early game. I don't know why Sephiel and Bartra suddenly pops into this game. That's weird. I've heard that there are some bugs with the sword. I'm just gonna skip these guys. What the hell? Why is it suddenly showing Fire Emblem 6 units? That's really weird. So yeah, I'm just gonna run Marcus here. Okay. That's so weird. I've heard that Fire Emblem 7 Karla is not in this game, so that's interesting. Skip. Alright, Athos versus Farina. Athos is good, but here's the question, right? Okay, so in a draft scenario, who would you rather draft? Would you draft Athos or Farina? Like, would you have a slightly easier final map, or would you have a good flyer in the mid-game? Like, Farina is certainly not a good unit, if you consider how pricey she is, but if you got the choice between one of these guys, wouldn't you select Farina over Athos? Because Athos is just available in a single chapter. Yes, he can one-shot the dragon with Luna, yes, he can kill Nergal, yes, he can basically solo the entire last chapter, but is he really more useful than a unit that, at the very least, can be available in, like, Cog of Destiny and the other maps? I think not. I think you can manage the final chapter just okay without Athos, so I'm going to select Farina here. This one, on the other hand, is a different story, because Karla is just so bad. Like, Karla versus Athos. Karla, what can she contribute to? Like, she can join in victory or death. She can't even do decent damage there. Her strength is so shit. Her growth rates aren't even good, so training her doesn't really give you anything. I mean, as Mecca said, Karla's an Easter egg unit. She's just there for fun, and that's also why she has just a bizarre recruitment, so she has a bizarre condition to join your army, using barter, which, you know, almost nobody wants to do. And as a result, she's just not a very good unit. So I'm actually going to select Athos today, because unlike Karla, Athos actually does something. This is a more tricky one. I guess Renault will probably win here, because again, unlike, I don't think Renault does a lot. I think Mecha gives way too much praise to Renault. He told me that, oh, Renault's a good unit. I don't agree with that, but at least he does something as opposed to nothing, so I'm gonna put him above Karla. Jaffar versus Vaida. You know, Vaida's a really impressive unit. She's basically Fire Emblem 7 Har, but I find that she joins like halfway through the hardest chapter in the game. When Vaida shows up, you usually have Cog of Destiny handled. Like, she comes like at the midpoint during the game, almost towards the end of it, and by the time you recruit her, there aren't really all that many enemies left. Jaffar is really good. At least I like Jaffar a lot. I think he has fantastic offense. Like, Vaida's a flyer, but at this point you got so many other flyers that you probably have trained up. You could have trained up Farina, you could have trained up Heath, you could have trained up Fiora. You know, I just don't think that Vaida, her late join time really screws her over in that regard. You don't really end up needing her. Whereas Jaffar, he joins earlier. Not that much earlier though. Their join time is very similar. I don't know, this is a tricky one actually. Both, like, I don't want to overrate Jaffar just because he was useful in my playthrough, because I know that I got a lot of silencer crits on the last one, and that really made him appear more useful than he actually was. But at the same time, I feel like Vaida is just one of those units that I feel like every time she shows up, I just don't have spots to spare for her, because my main roster is so established at that point. It's like, unless I've lost a lot of units, Vaida just doesn't end up contributing in a meaningful way. You know what, I'm going to tie them. I think they're probably equally useful. I'd rate them both 3 stars. I don't remember what I've rated Vaida. I think I rated her a lot higher than that. But yeah, I'm going to tie them up. Pent versus Harken, easily Pent. Harken's really good, Pent's just way better. I don't think there's, yeah, like A rank and staves, 1-2 range tomes. Like, Harken's bases are incredibly good, but Pent's just way too good. Harken is probably better than Louise though. While I like Louise a lot, hero with Harken's bases are just very difficult to compete with when you're a sniper, so I'm gonna select Harken here. Hawkeye versus Geitz. Geitz is good. He's a very good unit. Like, he has B rank in bows and really strong bases and hardware bonuses. The problem with Geitz is that the chapter he joins in is a chapter that most people don't unlock, because it requires you to train your lords. Your lords need to be 50+ level or higher in order to unlock the chapter where Geitz joins, which is something that you almost never do, unless you really play slowly or you really want to get Geitz. Whereas Hawkeye you get no matter what. Now, I think it's unfair to give Geitz a big minus because the chapter he joins in, but at the same time, I just feel like very few players actually get the chapter. And it's also a more tedious chapter to take on, because the other chapter you can beat really easily. But as far as Geitz goes, he's alright. He's a good unit, but Hawkeye is just way better. He joins earlier, and I do believe Hawkeye's bases are comparable to Geitz. He's a lot slower, that I know, but he does have more bulk and that juicy crit rate, so I think I'm gonna go with Hawkeye on this one. Heath versus Geitz. I'm not a big fan of Heath, but I do think I may have underrated him a little bit in my previous playthrough, because he is actually pretty good. His bases are strong, and he can do some really nice damage, and he's also more bulky than the rest of your Pegasus Knights. Yeah, sure, he's weak to magic, but that's nothing a Pure Water or Barrier Staff can't fix. So I think I'm gonna rate Heath higher because of his flying utility and better availability. Fiora versus Ninian, easy Ninian. Fiora versus Isadora. I think Fiora wins out. Isadora's just not that very good. Mecha keeps praising her, but I think he really overvalues Isadora. Fiora joins earlier with flyer utility, and if you train her up a little bit, which is not hard to do considering the Dread Isle is so full of magic users. Whereas Isadora, you saw I tried to use her in my Fire Emblem 7 playthrough, but it just didn't end up going all that well. I just don't think she's that good, so I'm gonna go with Fiora on this one. Legault versus Isadora. You know, I think I'm gonna have to select Isadora here. Right, Legault is useful, he's just Matthew with better bases. Like, if you remove Legault from the equation, you could just keep using Matthew and keep opening chests with Matthew. So I don't really consider Legault all that useful, so I'm gonna go with Isadora on this one at the very least. Raven versus Dart. Dart's decent, but I find that since Hawkeye's in the game, he's very overshadowed by him. Do you really want, like, the Ocean Seal is like 50,000 effective gold. Do you really think that's worth it to get a slightly better Berserker? I don't think so. Raven's better. Canas versus Dart, same principle really. I think Canas is actually pretty good. I think I definitely underrated him in my last playthrough. He does a lot of damage. Flux is a really strong tome, and the Dread Isle is full of magic users who you can train Canas up against. Like, he's in the Gaiden chapter where you meet Kishana for the first time. There's a million mages who do no damage to Canas. He has a weapon triangle advantage against them, and he two-shots most of them. He can get us so much experience there, so he's very easy to train. And, you know, you can early promote him for staff utility, or you can let him go all the way to 20 to have a really strong... Like, he's the only really good dark magic user in the game, and the Luna tome is on steroids. Having Luna before the final chapter is really good, so I'm gonna go with Canas here. Oswin versus Priscilla. I think Priscilla wins out here. Mounted staff utility is just very good. Priscilla is one of those units that I feel like you just have to use in every single playthrough, just because Serra just can't get the job done on her own, and... you don't really... It takes a while until you get your first guiding ring, so I'd say Priscilla wins here. Lowen versus Rebecca. This is one that's quite easy. Lowen's a Cavalier, Rebecca's an Archer. Wallace versus Rebecca. I still think Wallace is a better unit. I mean, I know a lot of people like Rebecca, but I think it's mostly just because she's cute. She's really bad. Bows in Fire Emblem 7 only does double damage to flyers as opposed to triples, so she can't even kill the Pegasus Knights in the early game. Like, she does like 16 damage to them when they have like 20 hit points. It's really fucking atrocious, really. So at least Wallace can do something. He's bad though, but I'd say she's still better than Rebecca. You know what? Actually, you know what? I'm actually going... No, you know what? I forget how horrible Wallace really is, especially if you don't play Lynn's story. He's like a general with no stat. You know what? I'm actually going to retract this, Rebecca fanboys. At least Rebecca is has early game availability and can chip in the early game, so Wallace, when he joins, there's no use for him whatsoever. So I'm actually going to go back on this and select Rebecca, because for a moment, I think I got a little bit too caught up in why Rebecca isn't good, that I completely forgot how fucking awful Wallace is. Matthew versus Nils, easy Nils. Matthew versus Lucius. I know that Lucius can potentially be pretty good. I know that if you train him up, I mean, light magic sucks, but Lucius's offense is really good. He has a lot of magic, and his magic and speed growth is also really good. But I still think Matthew is a more viable unit. Like, if I had the choice between Matthew and Lucius, I'd definitely pick Matthew, just because if you don't have Matthew, you don't get the silver card and you don't get the first guiding ring. I'd say the silver card and guiding ring is infinitely more useful than Lucius. Rath versus Lucius. It gets tougher, I think. I'm actually going to select Lucius here, because while Rath has that Brave Bow utility, Lucius's offense is really good. On the Dread Isle, you face a lot of mages. Dark Shamans. They're not called Dark Mages, Shamans. And Lucius can deal with them pretty well. And resistance is overall on a really low level in Fire Emblem 7, and he can usually double and deal decent damage. And once you give him a Shine Tome, he does even more damage. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Lucius here. Serra versus Urk. I actually say they're equal. Serra's decent, she has staff utility, Urk has early game tome availability. They're pretty much on the same level, I'd say. I'd have a tough time. Like, you need to use Serra, but Urk is really also one of those units that can really contribute a lot. If you train him up, he becomes sort of like Pent, like around the same stats as Pent, so yeah, I'm gonna tie them up. Sain versus Florina. I think Florina wins out here. Florina's just so good, especially if you train her in Lynn's story. You can also train Sain in Lynn's story, but Florina's just so good. Flying utility. She has a really impressive strength growth for a Pegasus Knight. She has really low con, so she can rescue everyone. Sain is a very good Cavalier, so it's a close call, but I'd say Florina wins out. Sain versus Will. This one is easy. I don't think I need to explain this. Hector versus Lynn. If you think Lynn is good, you're bad at Fire Emblem. Hector wins. Eliwood versus Lynn. I still think Eliwood's better than Lynn. Lynn has a better personal weapon in the Monikati, but Eliwood is not as squishy and is just they're close. I mean, I'd say they're both 1-star units, but Eliwood wins out just ever so slightly. At least he gets a horse when he promotes. Lynn gets bows. Ooh, okay, there's this one again. I don't know. Is it? Yeah, I guess Marcus versus Bartra. I don't know why it asked me to rate Fire Emblem 6 and Fire Emblem Bartra, but okay. I'm just gonna tie them up. Just skip. Farina is playable. Fargus is not. Athos is playable. Fargus is not. Renault is playable. Fargus is not. Karla is playable. Fargus is not. Pent versus Jaffar. This one's easy. Pent wins out. Better availability. Good unit. Jaffar. Lock to swords. Bad unit. Harken versus Jaffar. I'm going to go with Harken on this one. He's better in almost every way. Louise versus Jaffar. I'm probably gonna have to pick Jaffar again. I'm sorry to say, but Louise will probably end up pretty low on the tier list. Even though she has her uses, she's just not a super good unit. She's better than Nino, though. She's much better than Nino. I don't think I need to explain this one. She's definitely better than Nino. Ninian versus Hawkeye. Ninian wins out because she's a dancer. Fiora versus Hawkeye. This one's tough. This one is actually really tough. Fiora has flying utility. She's available much sooner, but she's usually overshadowed by Florina. Hawkeye is just a really solid. I think I'm gonna have to go with Hawkeye on this one. Fiora is good. She was very useful in my latest playthrough, but so was Hawkeye. Fiora versus Heath. I think I'm gonna go with Fiora. She's available a lot sooner. You can train her up. She might even be promoted by the time Heath shows up, so yeah, definitely Fiora. Isadora versus Heath, I'm gonna have to say Heath here. He has more potential than Isadora. Isadora just doesn't grow very well. Her bases are really low. Her con sucks, so she gets weighed down by the most basic of weapons. Heath can at the very least use a Brave Lance and quadruple some enemies. Geitz versus Isadora, I'm gonna have to go with Geitz here. I just don't rate Isadora very highly, and I think Geitz is a really good pre-promote. Raven versus Priscilla, I think Raven. Priscilla's good, but Raven's offense is just fantastic. Canas versus Priscilla. It gets more tricky. I think I'd rather have Priscilla than Canas. Canas is decent, but Priscilla is just so much more important. Oswin versus Canas. This one's tricky. I like Oswin. He's pretty good. He's available in the early game. Canas is one of those units, he's alright, but you don't really need him. I think that's why they also put him in the guidance chapters, so yeah, I'm gonna go with Oswin on this one. Guy versus Canas. I still think Guy has an edge over Canas, simply because he joins with that killing edge and he can take down, like, he can one-run fighters and brigands that other units have to, like, you have to spend like 3 units to get down a fighter on hard mode, whereas Guy can take him out in one or two hits. And Guy continues to be pretty good on the offense, whereas Canas, he spends a lot of time to get going, so I'm gonna go with Guy here. Lowen versus Nils. Nils wins out. Matthew versus Lowen. This is a more tricky one. I think Matthew's gonna end up pretty high on this tier list, but I also think that Matthew's just one of those units that are just so important to Fire Emblem 7. But at the same time, it's tricky. It's a tricky choice because, like, how do you really rate a thief against a cavalier? Because with Matthew, is usually the case, you bring him if there's something to steal or a chest to open. With Lowen, you bring him if you can bring him. So, how do you really rate the utility of a thief versus the combat ability of a cavalier? It's a tricky choice to make, I think, but I think I'm going to pick Matthew. Lucius versus Lowen. I'm going to select Lowen here. He's available sooner, has better offense, and he can tank. Lucius versus Rebecca. Lucius is better than Rebecca. Rath versus Rebecca. I'd still say Rath has more utility than Rebecca. He can be trained in Lynn's story. If he doesn't, he can use Brave Bows the moment he joins. He can do more damage than Rebecca and has a mount. So I'd say Rath. Florina versus Serra. I'd say Florina. She's just so good. Sain versus Serra. I'd say Sain is better. Cavaliers are really strong, especially the Christmas Cavaliers of Fire Emblem 7. Kent and Sain are just really good units. I'd say Kent is probably also better than Serra. Serra's definitely better than Will, though. But most units are better than Will. Okay, now we're gonna get to the crap fest, like the crappy units. Will versus Dorcas. I'd say Dorcas is better. Dorcas and Bartros actually... I think I rated them both 1 star, but I think in hindsight I'd probably rate them 2 stars. Even though Dorcas' speed sucks, it's not a huge detriment that he can't double, because he can still use him to, like, he still does a lot of damage in one hit. He still does a lot of damage in one hit with a steel axe, so you can, like, soften up a cavalier for another unit to come in and pick up the kill, and he can tank pretty decently, so I'm gonna go with Dorcas here. Marcus versus Hector. I still don't know if this is Marcus, or if it's Fire Emblem 6 Marcus, but Marcus is obviously better than Hector. He's the best unit in the game. Hector's better than Melinas. Eliwood's better than Melinas. Lynn's better than Melinas. Farina's better. Again, I'm just going to skip these because they're unplayable, or Linus is unplayable. Ninian versus Pent. Ninian's definitely better than Pent. Hawkeye versus Pent. I'd say Pent wins. Even though Hawkeye is available sooner, Pent's just so good. Harken versus Hawkeye. I think I selected Hawkeye. Yeah, I think so. No, I haven't been asked to rate these earlier, but I still think Hawkeye's better than Harken. Yeah, I think so. Fiora versus Harken. Again, Harken's one of those units who are just really strong, but his late join time does screw him over a lot. At least Fiora's available, and she has flying utilities. I'm gonna go with Fiora. Heath versus Harken. Again, this is another tricky one, but I think I'm gonna end up going with Heath just because of his earlier join time. Geitz versus Harken. This one gets tougher. I think I'm gonna go with Harken. Or this one's hard actually. They're both really good pre-promoted units. Geitz joins a little earlier though, but he's also available in that shitty chapter, which almost no one gets. Whereas Harken is a unit that you will most likely always get because Karla is not available. Or, sorry, Karla, you have to pick within him and Karla, and you usually pick Harken, so... I don't know. This is a tricky one. I'm not sure if it's fair to rate them based on the chapter that they show. Like, I'm not sure if it's fair to give Geitz the penalty of he's joins in a tricky chapter, but... I think overall, I think Harken wins out a little bit because his base, like Harken's bases, you don't, like Harken at base can fight in the final chapter. That's how strong he is. Like his bases are crazy. Jaffar versus Geitz. I think I'm gonna rate Geitz higher. I am aware that I overvalue Jaffar because of my luck with silencers, so I think I'm gonna say Geitz is a better unit. Isadora versus Jaffar. Jaffar is better. Isadora is just not very good. Louise versus Isadora. I think I'm actually gonna rate Louise higher. Louise, there's a number of things Louise can do that makes her very good. She can take on druids with Luna, which are a pain. She is really hard to kill when she's next to Pent. Her offense with the Brave Bow is really good. She can usually quadruple most enemies. Problem I have with Isadora is she's not very good at killing things, and her survivability is really bad. So, whereas Louise usually keep her behind another bulky unit. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Louise here. Isadora versus Nino. Isadora wins out. Legault versus Nino. Everyone wins against Nino, pretty much. Nils wins against Raven because he's a dancer. Raven versus Matthew. Again, it's tricky for me to rate Thieves up against other units, but I think I'm gonna go with Raven here, just because his offense is just so good. Here, at least, we got Matthew versus Priscilla, 2 utility units against each other. One is important for getting the Guiding Ring and the silver card. Another one is good for healing. Priscilla's just really solid, though. I think she wins against Matthew, just because a mounted healer is such a must. Oswin versus Matthew. I'd say Oswin's a more valuable character in the early game, but so is Matthew. But I think I'm going to rate Oswin higher. Matthew versus Guy. Again, I don't know how to... I don't properly know how to rate Matthew up against Guy, but I think I'm going to go with Matthew here. Guy's good, but Matthew provides more. Like, Guy's useful in a small portion of the early game. Matthew is a must in the early game, plus he's sort of useful in the mid game as well, so... Lowen versus Guy, same thing when I rate Lowen higher. Lucius versus Guy, I'm probably going to rate Lucius above Guy. Actually, this one's really close. I think I'm going to tie them. Rath versus Canas. I'd say Canas is more useful. He joins earlier. He can get staff utility. Dark magic is pretty powerful. Rath versus Dart. I think I'm going to rate Darth above Rath. Dart's not bad. I just think that the cost of promoting him is really high, but he's a pretty good unit if you train him. Marcus versus Florina. Marcus wins out. Hector versus Florina. Hector is alright. He's not fantastic though. I think Florina wins out. Yeah, Florina, definitely. Hector versus Sain. Sain wins out because he's a Cavalier. Same thing with Pent. Serra versus Hector. I do like Hector a lot. This is a tricky one. They're both 3 stars, I'd say. I'm gonna tie them. Eliwood versus Dorcas. Eliwood's better. Lynn versus Dorcas. Oh, this is a tricky one. At least Lynn has her Manicati. And she can be promoted into something that does decently in the endgame. So I'm gonna go with Lynn here. Dorcas wins. Will wins against Merlinus. Farina versus Ninian. Ninian wins because she's a dancer. Pent versus Farina. Pent wins because he's Pent and doesn't cost money. Hawkeye wins against Farina because he doesn't cost money and he's good. Farina versus Fiora. I'd say Fiora wins. Even though Farina has better stats, she costs 20,000 to recruit. That's a lot of investment. Heath versus Farina, same thing, really. A flyer that doesn't cost money versus a flyer that costs money. Same thing with Harken. Even though his availability is bad, he's still better than Farina. I'd say Geitz is probably better than Farina as well. Jaffar and Farina, I'd say Farina probably wins out against Jaffar though. I really don't know if it's fair to rate her based on the fact that she costs 20,000, but I think it should matter, right? Because it's still an investment. Like, it's 20,000 gold you're not gonna have to buy equipment, which could help other characters. 20,000 is not like it's a small sum either, so yeah. I'd say Farina. Jaffar is just not super good. Athos versus Jaffar. Another tricky one. Athos just so good in the final chapter, but do you really need the help of Athos in the final chapter? Do you really need it? He's nice to have around, but is he necessary? I don't think so. Louise, same thing. Louise is available. Athos is only available for 1 chapter. Same thing here. I'm probably gonna rate Athos really lowly just because of that. Because I just don't think it's necessary. He's just a convenient unit to have around. Same, yeah, Legault. Nino versus Athos. I'm probably gonna rate Athos over Nino. Because Nino's just so bad. Same thing with Renault, really. I'm sorry, Nino fanboys, but... You know what? Nino versus Karla. I'm actually gonna rate Nino above Karla, because unlike Karla, Nino can do something. Marcus versus Nils. You know, a lot of people say I overrate dancers, and I do sort of agree that dancers tend to end up too high on the tier list. I'm actually gonna rate Marcus higher, because Marcus is insane in Fire Emblem 7. However, I'd say Nils is better than Florina. Raven versus Florina. I'm gonna say Florina's better. She's just so good. Sain versus Raven. I think I'm gonna rate Raven above Sain. Or will I? Sain's a Cavalier. He's playable in Lynn's story. You know what? No. I'm gonna go with Sain. Superior movement, can use lances. Yeah, definitely. Same thing with Kent. Hector versus Raven, I'd say Raven's better. Hector's just not super good. Raven has insane offense, even though he can't use the hand axe, which certainly gives Hector a few points. I still think Raven's offense is just better. Priscilla versus Hector. Priscilla wins out. More movements, staff utility, just a really solid unit. Oswin versus Hector. Here we're talking 2 very slow units. One can use a hand axe, one can use a javelin. They're pretty similar if you think about it. Oswin's higher base level, so he has higher stats, but Hector grows a lot faster. Hector's not weak to armor slayers. Oswin is. You rarely face enemy armor slayers, so this isn't a big issue, but something to point out at the very least. Pretty sure Hector has 5 move, doesn't he? Pretty sure, doesn't Hector have 5 move? I think he does. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Hector here. However, Oswin's better than Eliwood, but then again, most people are. Matthew's better than Eliwood, Lowen is better than Eliwood, Lucius is better than Eliwood, Canas is better than Eliwood, Dart's better than Eliwood, Rath's better than Eliwood, Eliwood's better than Rebecca, Lynn's better than Rebecca, Dorcas is better than Rebecca. Will versus Rebecca, I'd say that they're pretty equal. Rebecca joins earlier in the main story, but Will is trainable in the tutorial. So if you give him a couple kills, he can have better bases than Rebecca when he joins. Rebecca's fast, Will's strong. I'd say I'm gonna tie them up. They're both 1 stars. Wallace wins against Merlinus. Marcus wins against Ninian. Nils and Ninian, I'm gonna tie them up because they're the same unit. Florina versus Pent. This is a tricky one, but I'd say Pent. Florina's available in the early game, but Pent is just crazy. Hawkeye versus Florina. I'm gonna say Florina here. Hawkeye's good, but Florina's better. Sain versus Hawkeye. I think I'm gonna go with Sain. Kent and Sain are just really strong in Fire Emblem 7 if you want to use them, so I'm gonna rate both Kent and Sain above Hawkeye. Raven versus Hawkeye. That's a tricky one. Probably Raven. Priscilla versus Hawkeye. Again, I like Priscilla a lot. She has really good utility. Hector versus Hawkeye. Hawkeye wins out for sure. Hawkeye is just really strong. Fiora versus Hector. I'd say Fiora wins out. Flying utility is just really good. Heath versus Hector. I'd still think Heath's a better unit. Harken versus Hector. I think we're gonna go with Hector here because Harken's availability really screws him over, I'd say. He joins so late. So I'm gonna go with Hector here. Oswin versus Harken, same thing. I do rate Oswin a lot higher just because of his early game availability. Matthew versus Harken, same thing. Matthew's just so essential in Fire Emblem 7. Lowen versus Harken. By the time Harken shows up, Lowen can be a really strong paladin. Lucius versus Harken. Again, I don't know. Just I want to say Harken's good, but again, his late join time really screws him over. So I think I'm actually gonna go with Lucius on this one, just because Lucius has really good offense, and if you train him into a bishop, he can do just as much damage as Harken can. It's just a lot more squishy. Canas versus Harken, same concept, I'd say. Canas is pretty good if you train him. Dart versus Harken, I'm gonna go with Harken here, just because I think that Dart is not strong enough to justify Harken's basis, and again, the steep cost of promoting him to a Berserker, so I'm gonna go with Harken here. Geitz versus Dart, I'd say same concept, I think Geitz is better. Farina versus Dart, here we have two units who both have very steep costs. Farina costs 20,000, Dart costs effectively 50,000 to promote, if you consider the fact that the Ocean Steel is 25,000, and with a silver card, this can equate into 50,000 gold. Same thing with Farina though, if you double her recruitment cost, which is up to 40,000, like 20,000 and then 40,000 in terms of silver cards. So Dart's a slightly more expensive investment. Farina is a better unit, I'd say, because she's flying utility and good stats. And Dart costs 5,000 more, so, or 10,000 more, depending on whether or not you choose to view it as silver card money. So I'm gonna go with Farina here. Dart versus Jaffar. I think I'm gonna go with Jaffar on this one. For the same reason, Dart just has a really steep cost. Louise versus Dart. Tricky choice, but I think I'm gonna go with Louise for the same reason. However, I'd say Dart is better than Isadora. Rath versus Isadora, I'd say Rath is probably better. Or maybe not. This is a tricky one. I think I'm gonna tie them up. I'd say they're probably on the same level. Eliwood versus Legault, I'd say that Eliwood's probably better, because Legault there's not really that much point to him, if you got Matthew. Lynn versus Legault, same thing. Dorcas versus Legault, at least Dorcas is available in the early game. Will versus Legault, same concept really, Will's available in the early game. Wallace versus Legault, well, Legault does something, Wallace doesn't, so. Athos does something, Wallace doesn't do anything. Renault do something, or he does something, and Wallace doesn't do anything. Nino does something, Wallace is just so bad. Here we have two units who don't do anything at all. But one of them requires another bad character to be trained, so at least Wallace doesn't have that going for him, so I'd select Wallace here over Karla. At least Karla wins over a unit that's not a unit. And the same thing here, I guess. Alright, and we are done, ladies and gentlemen. Let's check out the tier list. So, first place, we got Marcus. That's not particularly surprising. And then we got Nils and Ninian, who are basically the same unit. And then we have Pent as... Oh, wow, I didn't expect Pent to be so high, actually. That's pretty impressive. We got Pent, Florina, Sain, Kent, Raven, Priscilla, Hawkeye, Fiora, Heath, Hector. Wow, Hector on number 13? Really? That's really fucking high. Serra, Oswin, Matthew, Lowen, Lucius, Canas, Harken, Geitz, Farina, Jaffar, Vaida, Louise. Number 2, I think Louise ended up way too high, if I'm going to be completely honest. Dart, Rath, Isadora, Eliwood, Lynn, Dorcas, Will, Rebecca, Legault, Athos, Renault, Nino, Wallace, Karla, and... well, how the fuck did Merlinus end up above Bartra? That's very impressive. I think I may have screwed up and selected Bartra and unselected Bartra because I saw his Binding Blade portrait. I don't know. That's really impressive, actually. Merlinus ended up like an unplayable character was better than Bartra. I think this is a mistake. I don't think Bartra should have been here. Bartra is better than no, he's like, he's better than, no, he's worse than Dorcas, but he should have been number 33, I think. I don't know why he ended up so low. I don't think you guys can even see it from here because the Camtasia of the window. Yeah, it's my bad, guys. There we go. You should be able to see it now. So do I agree with this tier lists? I think there's some mistakes with it. I think that, as I said, I think Louise ended up a little bit too high on 27. I think I rated her a little bit biasly. I'd say that I'm wondering if maybe Dorcas is better than Lynn. Athos is just really low, but it's, again, he's good for what he does, but it's just that he does so little. I think Wallace is probably, Karla's essentially the worst unit, but I agree with that. I'm pretty happy with like the first 20 people on my list, I'd say, but in the things starting to fall a little bit out of place in the later part of the lists here, but I think this is a decent tier list. I don't know if I agree 100%, but at least like the top 5 I do. Sain number 6, that's really high. That's really high. I expected Raven to be higher, and actually no, I did rate Sain above Raven, so I guess this is pretty okay. Anyway, guys, as always, I will post the entire tier lists in the video description if you guys want to go read it. As always, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what tier list you want to see next time. And as always, my name is Mengs, and I shall see you guys soon. Like and comment. Bye-bye.